demanded of them under international law. Borders. The principle is clear. I don't want to get into it now because I was very glad to see that Dr. Ben-Ami quoted it 3 times in his book. It's inadmissible to acquire territory by war. Under international law, Israel had to withdraw from all of the West Bank and all of Gaza. As the World Court put it in July 2004, those are, quote, occupied Palestinian territories. Now, however you want to argue over percentages, there is no question, and I know Dr. Ben-Ami won't dispute it, the Palestinians were willing to make concessions on the borders. What percentage? There's differences, but there's no question they were willing to make concessions. Jerusalem. Jerusalem's an interesting case, because if you read Dr. Ben-Ami or the standard mainstream accounts in the United States, everyone talks about the huge concessions that Barak was willing to make on Jerusalem. But under international law, Israel has not one atom of sovereignty over any of Jerusalem. Read the World Court decision. The World Court decision said Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. Now, the Palestinians were willing, the exact lines I'm not going to get into now. They are complicated. But I'm sure Dr. Ben-Ami will not dispute they were willing to divide Jerusalem roughly in half, the Jewish side to Israel, the Arab side to the Palestinians. And number 4, refugees. On the question of refugees, it's not a dispute under international law. Remarkably, even fairly conservative human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, in 2000 during the Camp David talks, they issued statements on the question of the right of return. And they stated categorically, under international law, every Palestinian, roughly 5 to 6 million, has the right to return, not to some little parcels, 1% of Israel, which Israel is about, Israel would swap, return to their homes or the environs of their homes in Israel. That's the law. Now, Dr. Ben-Ami will surely agree that the Palestinians were not demanding and never demanded the full return of 6 million refugees. He gives a figure of 400,000 to 800,000. In fact, I'm not going to get into the numbers because it's very hard to pin it down. Other authors have given figures of the tens of thousands to 200,000 refugees returning. That's well short of 6 million. On every single issue, all the concessions came from the Palestinians. The problem is everyone, including Dr. Ben-Ami in his book, he begins with what Israel wants and how much of it wants it's willing to give up. But that's not the relevant framework. The only relevant framework is, under international law, what you're entitled to. And when you use that framework, it's a very, very different picture.
If you can bear to make this response brief,
yes.
Dr. Shlomo.
Okay. In the last third part of the book, as Dr. Finkelstein says, there is the diplomat, and this same diplomat still behaves in a way as a historian when he says in this book that Camp David was not the missed opportunity for the Palestinians, and if I were a Palestinian, I would have rejected Camp David as well. This is something I put in the book. But Taba is the problem. The Clinton parameters are the problem. Because the Clinton parameters, in my view...
Maybe you could explain them what that is. I don't think most people will know the Clinton parameters. So
well, the Clinton parameters say the following. They say that on the territorial issue, the Palestinians will get 100% of Gaza, 97% of the West Bank, plus a safe passage from Gaza to the West Bank to make the state viable. There will be a land swap. The 97%, which I mentioned, takes into account the land swap. or they will get 3% on this side within the state of Israel. So we will have the blocks of settlements, and they will be able to settle refugees on this side of the border. About Jerusalem, it says what is Jewish is Israeli, and what is Palestinian is and what is Arab is Palestinian. It includes full-fledged sovereignty for the Palestinians on Temple Mount, on the Haram al-Sharif, no sovereignty, no Jewish sovereignty on the Haram al-Sharif, which was at the time and continues to be a major problem for Israelis and Jews, that these things mean to them a lot. And then with the question of refugees, it says that the refugees will return to historic Palestine, to historical Palestine, and that Israel will maintain its sovereign right of admission. That is, it will have to absorb a number of refugees, but with restrictions that need to be negotiated between the parties. But the bulk of the refugees will be allowed to return to the state of Palestine. This is the essence of the Clinton parameters. What Dr. Finkelstein said here about international law, I want to make it clear. It is important, it is vital for a civilized community of nations to have an access of principles based on international law around which to run the affairs of our chaotic world. It is very important, it is vital, etc. But at the same time, when you go into political issues and you need to settle differences, historical differences, differences that have to do with political rights, security concerns, historical memories, etc., it is almost impossible to do things on the basis of international law, but rather on something that is as close as possible to the requirements of international law. The very fact that, as Dr. Finkelstein rightly says, the Palestinians were ready to make this or that concession, is the reflection of them understanding that there is no viability, there is no possibility really to reach an agreement that says let us apply automatically and rigidly the requirements of international law.
Former Israeli Foreign Minister Shlomo Ben-Ami debating Norman Finkelstein in a Firehouse studio. We moved our discussion then to the last time Israelis and Palestinians met for peace negotiations in the Egyptian resort town of Taba in January 2001. This is Norman Finkelstein.
What actually happened? What actually happened was exactly as what was announced by the White House spokesman on January 3rd, 2001. The official statement was both the Israelis and the Palestinians have accepted the Clinton parameters with some reservations. Both sides entered reservations on the Clinton parameters. Yes. Dr. Ben-Ami leaves out in the book both sides. He only mentions the reservations by the Palestinians. Number two, I was surprised to notice one of the books Dr. Ben-Ami recommends is the book by Clayton Swisher called The Truth at Camp David. I looked in the book. On page 402 of Clayton Swisher's book, when he's discussing the issue of entering reservations to Clinton's parameters, he quotes none other than Shlomo Ben-Ami. You acknowledged, you called them relatively minor, but you acknowledged that Barak entered, you called it several pages of reservations. In fact, Barak sent a 10-page letter of reservations to the Clinton parameters. It was exactly symmetrical. Both the Israelis and the Palestinians agreed to the Clinton parameters with some reservations. Yeah. Wait, one last point. Dr. Ben-Ami left out another crucial point in his account. He doesn't tell us why Taba ended. It ended officially when Barak withdrew his negotiators. It wasn't the Palestinians who walked out of Taba.